Are your profits being siphoned away? On this episode of Driven Too Far, we're talking about fuel fraud in trucking. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Welcome back to Driven Too Far. On this episode, we're talking about fuel fraud and how it impacts drivers. There's actually two kinds of fuel fraud that's really happening out there, and the first one is through third-party fraudsters. Generally, what they do is they set up the pump with a skimmer or a card reader that you may or may not be able to notice or see at the pump. Sometimes the older type skimmers will sit right outside where you insert the card and swipe it. They're a little more obvious, but they're getting trickier with that. They're actually breaking into the pump and putting the skimmer on the inside where you can't see it, so it's very hard to detect. Now, one of the things you may look for is within the pump mechanism itself, they will have a section of that can be removed for service, and there's usually a keyed lock on that. Most times what the petroleum service companies are doing nowadays is they're using a piece of security tape to put over that lock. So once they service it, they get in and do what they need to do. They lock it back up. They put the security tape over it. Now, if you get to a pump, look for that security tape. And if it looks like that security tape's been peeled off or cut or broken anyway, there's a really good chance that somebody's got in there and put a skimmer in there to record your fuel card number. So what do the fraudsters do with it once they've captured your fuel card number? They may also have your name, your company's name, your tractor number, and whatever other information was on that card. But they have a limited time to work. So once they put their plan into action, they need to get as much fuel out of the system as possible before you or the carrier realizes that something's gone wrong. Oftentimes what the fraudster will do is they'll go back and they'll use that card, or they'll clone your card. They'll take a blank fuel card or credit card, if you will, and they'll transfer those digits onto the new card so they can walk up to any pump and swipe it and start pumping fuel out of the tank, and it's charging your company to do that. Now, they've got a limited time to get all this done because odds are something's going to throw up a red flag, and whether it be the fuel card company or maybe even your own company is going to notice that there's gallons being pumped and charged at a place where you're not really at. The fraudsters may empty that fuel, just pump it into a reserve tank of some sort and plan on selling it for cash later. That's one of the ways they take the fuel and resell it and make money. The other thing they might do is they may advertise ahead of time and say, hey, I'm selling diesel fuel for 50 cents on the dollar. Is anybody willing to pay me cash for that? And they set up a time and a place where another truck comes in, they swipe the card, they pump the fuel into the other truck, and then that driver pays the fraudster cash, so he gets away with cash. So that's a couple of the ways that they're stealing the fuel, charging it to you, and they're getting away with money. The other type of fraud that's happening out there is what we call friendly fraud. And that's actually like an internal job within the company. And it could be a driver stealing fuel. It could maybe be a dispatcher or somebody else within the organization that has access to the fuel cards and that type of information. One of the things that I went through and witnessed, a quick story for you, is we had a father-son group working for us. The dad was a company driver and the son was a lease operator. And they happen to be going to the same place. The dad pulls up, he swipes the company fuel card in the system. He pumps a little bit of fuel into his truck, then he pulls forward. The kid pulls up, the son pulls up with his owner operator truck, who should be paying for his own fuel, and they fill that truck too. So all the fuel got charged to the company fuel card, and the owner operator gets away with full tanks. So we caught it through our audit process, and we confronted him about it and said, hey, this is what happened. It looks like you put fuel in his truck and it got charged to your company card. How would that happen? And of course they denied it, and they said, oh, it must have been a misunderstanding or a mistake, but it was no mistake. They intentionally did that. They were trying to purposely fill the owner operator's truck and charge it back to our company and get away with 300 gallons of fuel. So that's a common way to do it. Sometimes a company guy will even have a buddy, or maybe it's somebody he doesn't even know, and the company guy's putting fuel in his truck, lays the pump down on the ground, doesn't shut it off, moves his truck, next truck pulls up, they continue to fill that second truck with the fuel, and then the second driver just pays the first guy a little bit of cash for his pocket, for his trouble, and all the fuel got charged to the company truck. So that's a pretty common way they're getting away with this. So let's talk a little bit about prevention and how are we as carriers and companies fighting back with this? There's a lot. It's the world is really moving to a digital world. I think it won't be long before we don't issue fuel cards to drivers at all anymore. There'll be some kind of platform out there, whether it be on your cell phone, the tablet in your truck, or something like that. But it'll be fully digital, where it's a cardless situation, and that's available now. So a lot of the big carriers are already using it. One of the ways they do that is they send you a virtual card number. So a virtual 16-digit card number can come over your tablet in the truck, and then the driver gets down and he punches the information into the pump, and the pump turns on. So no card was ever swiped. That virtual card number was good for one-time use only, and probably limited to a certain number of gallons. So the company may be limited to no more than 250 or 300 gallons, depending on the size of the tanks and the trucks they run. Or it may be as sophisticated as knowing that you had half tanks, you had 100 gallons on board, you've got 200 gallons total capacity, so that virtual card's only going to allow you to throw on another 100 gallons. There's some new mobile payment apps out there where the driver just essentially pulls up to the pump, sits back, probably has an app on his phone or the tablet, and punches in the information, and again, the pump turns on automatically. And again, it's only good for probably a certain time limit and only for so many gallons at a time. So that stuff's available right now. One of the new things we're using and probably should have used sooner, but it's the use of the telematics in the truck. So think about your mobile comm system and your satellites. It's verifying that the truck is actually at the right place. So if the driver pulls up to a fuel pump and he swipes his card, then the telematics kicks in and says, this driver just swiped a card at this Flying J in this location. And then the telematics will ping the truck to verify the truck is actually at that location. So that's one way the telematics is helping avoid fuel fraud as well. By the way, I think a lot of the bigger carriers are already on top of a lot of this and have processes in place. Maybe you're an independent or you're working for a smaller carrier that this is one of those things that seems like you probably haven't done anything until you get burned, until you get away, you get hit with some fraud and people get away with some fuel on you. And for whatever reason, that is what makes us act and go figure out what we need to change. But be proactive with this, right? Go talk to your company and ask them if they're using fuel fraud prevention techniques and what they're using. We happen to use the WEX card, or the EFS card as it was known in the past. So some of these things are free of service. All you've got to do as a company is request that they're turned on. It may require a little bit more activity from the driver, but if it's going to save several hundreds of dollars, or the potential of several hundreds of dollars being taken away from you, I think that's a pretty easy decision to do. It just probably means you have to punch in a PIN number, maybe a trip number, some different things, but make sure you're doing what you can to prevent that. There's also some new technology on the horizon that gets a little more sophisticated, and I believe the fuel card companies are probably going to charge the carriers something extra. But as these fraudsters get more and more complicated with, or sophisticated, probably a better word, with how they're figuring out how to get this fuel, we got to stay ahead of them. So if it costs me $7 per truck per month to make sure we don't have fraud issues, it may be worth that. And by the way, we worked with a small flatbed operation out of central Pennsylvania. I know when we'd recently talked about some of these fraud issues, they had gotten hit with, I want to say it was over $50,000 worth of fraud before they actually figured out what was going on and they were getting hit. So when you think about that, what kind of impact would that have on a small company? It's huge. So anyways, really need to be proactive with the fuel card fraud. Again, it happens two ways. That's the third-party fraudster with probably skimming your card and stealing your numbers, or it can happen internally too. So make sure you're putting measures in place. Don't give everybody access to those fuel card numbers or the ability to issue new fuel cards and get into the EFS or COM data type systems to change information or override information. That's really where the internal fraud's coming from. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. To stay up on the latest industry trends, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button.